as desired.
This is the best part of every pod.
This is the best part. It feels like this like gradual build up to the reveal of our faces. Everyone,
Amazing.
direct your attention to the waiting screen. The show will begin soon. As soon as we verify.
YouTube is alive.
YouTube's alive. Is Twitch alive?
Twitch is alive.
Then we shall be alive.
All right.
Welcome, everyone, for the last preseason episode of 100 Talk. Jordan, quick quiz. How many days are left until the start of the LCS season?
2.
2?
Nope.
We are starting this week, not 2 days, not 2 days. And thankfully, 100 Thieves has been gracious enough to bless us with daily heist episodes, player profiles, right?
What a blessing.
What
a blessing.
What a blessing. Hashtag blessed. We got the full heist like leading into the season a couple days ago. Today they dropped the surprise someday episode on us. It's a great time to be a 100 Thieves fan.
You know, Nate Shaw was talking about, he said, more content. More content. We're having more content. And I didn't think that he meant like a daily drop, but he did. He did.
Are we setting the standard? Is this going to be daily content for the whole season?
It's a morning show. Every morning I wake up, I put on the heist.
if only that could be possible, man. But I think like Gabe and Logan and everybody would explode. So
yeah, they would need like 10 more Gabe and Logans and Marks.
I mean, we're fans of those guys, but we don't want them to die in their work.
Yeah.
Well, there's another reason that it's an exciting time to be a 100 Thieves fan, and that is, as many of you may know, that we got him. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. The guy who is behind every story of how someone got involved into esports. He's here with us in a secret room behind everything.
In an undisclosed location. I think last episode I called him a Kingmaker.
Yes, you did. You used that exact term. And that is no less than what he is. Let's not hesitate any longer. Bring out this mythical legend, rare shiny Pokemon, Blake Robbins. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello. Woo. Am I live now? Wow, this is amazing.
This is real. You are really live on the internet with.
All right. Well, I'm excited to be here.
Good, man. We're
super excited to have you.
Again, hashtag blessed to have you in your geography hoodie. That is a wonderful choice. If you're going to sport a piece of 100 Thieves apparel, that is not a bad one.
I actually wasn't wearing 100 Thieves apparel today, and I put it on just for this, just so you know.
Hey, don't tell them that. Just pretend like you've been wearing it the whole time.
Well, I'm sorry. I've been wearing it all day, guys. I promise.
There you go.
Yeah. People at my office always ask me on Mondays what I'm doing, but they'll just have to watch the show to figure it out.
You wear it all day, every day?
I can't. No, I would have someone would have a word with me.
Fair.
Let me tell you, my office dress code is awesome, so I'm wearing 100 Thieves apparel many days. So yes, we have Blake here, and Blake is a like 100 Thieves overlord board member, and is also with Ludlow Ventures,
title.
A partner with Ludlow Ventures. You might have seen him on Forbes 30 under 30 list from 2018. That's how legendary this young man is. And so we've interviewed like a few special guests on the show, and a couple of them have definitely said that he is the one that brought them to 100 Thieves.
Yeah.
And we are so grateful because now we have this guy who's about to drop some hot nuggets of knowledge about the esports industry and 100 Thieves. Whew, I'm excited.
Yeah, so I'm excited to be here as well.
So for anybody who's not seen the pod before, this is not actually like an interview series podcast, although that's what we've been for the last 2 months while there's less League of Legends happening in the competitive world. But just in case you haven't tuned into our regular programming, usually what we're doing is we are coming to you live on Sunday nights after the LCS games have wrapped for the weekend to do silver tier analysis, but more just our reactions to the team, how it's going, how the games went, what we're enjoying, what we think we need to do, that kind of stuff. So if you are watching this and you are enjoying, definitely invite you back this Sunday. That's 2 or 3 days from now. I can't remember exactly how many, something like that. But check back because we'll return to regular programming this week.
That's right. We're excited.
So,
all righty, let's jump right into this. Yeah,
okay.
Let's jump right into the interview, Jordan.
We both said it, so that means we can go. Blake, if you could start, we've heard a lot from the various people we've talked to within the organization, but would love to hear from you a little bit about kind of your path to 100 Thieves, and the role you played in the early days, as well as a little bit more on kind of the role you play today, just so that we can contextualize all of this appropriately.
No, absolutely. It's a good question, and like I definitely get asked it a bunch. I think there's a short and a long answer. I'll try and do somewhere in between. I think. I'm so basically there's a path where like I always was a gamer. I was like a Call of Duty kid growing up. I played a ton of Call of Duty, and actually like I wouldn't say like played competitively, but like somewhat competitively. I played on like there used to be a site called Game Battles, and like played on their ladder matches and things like that. And then this was when I was in high school, and I remember like telling my parents like I'm going to become a professional Call of Duty player and all of this, and them being like, what? Like this isn't a thing. And I basically like at that time I would watch a ton of Halo. I looked up to like the like Walshy and like those guys, like they were like the absolute legends. And from there, I basically just stopped playing video games competitively when my parents told me I needed to focus on school. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to go to college and everything else. And then through some weird path, I basically, when I ended up in like venture and doing investing in early stage companies, I started to see a lot of people talking about like competitive gaming and esports. And I was like, this is so weird because like I did this as a kid, like and like I still am like a fan of this space and would love to dive back in. And so I remember just like buying a PC or like building a PC like basically like a month after seeing that and being like, all right, I'm gonna like build a PC and like I'm just gonna go back in and like become a gamer again. And I played a lot of Counter-Strike. Like I probably have like 2,500 hours on Counter-Strike at this point.
Wow, that's no small amount.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of my life playing Counter-Strike, and then I actually basically like fast forwarding a couple of years, like I didn't play a ton of League of Legends. I sort of knew it existed just because again, like people in like the venture community in general were talking about how amazing the game was. And I went to Worlds 2016, like the finals, actually with Jackson.
Sick.
Nice. Yeah. And like we sat there and watched the finals and like watched Bang just obviously like do amazing and Faker and all this stuff, and like it's like super surreal that Bang is now on the team and everything else, but like
little did you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you told Jackson and I like in 2016 when we were sitting there like that we would later be a part of something that Bang was like a part of would be insane. So I basically at the same time of all of that like happening, when I joined the venture firm that I was part of, or no, I'm now part of Ludlow, one of our biggest investors in our fund is Dan Gilbert, who owns the Cavs and everything else. And so basically, I had went to Dan, and a couple of people on Dan's team have been telling him like, hey, you should get into esports and look at buying a team or whatever that might be. And so we talked with quite a few teams, and I remember Dan just being like, why don't we try and start our own team and all this stuff? And I was like, well, like no one's gonna really care. Like, if, like the space is like much more about being endemic and entering in a really natural way than just like, hey, this is like a really established business person coming into the space. And so I sort of was like, we need to find someone really great to like work on this with and whatever that might be. And coincidentally, like I always knew that like Nate Chat existed because I was a Call of Duty kid, and I followed his YouTube, and like I was like a super fan. Like honestly, like I watched all of his YouTube videos and his vlogs and everything else. And I remember being like, well, like there's sort of like a perfect scenario where 100 Thieves exists as a brand, and like it's sort of just sitting dormant. And I was like, there is a world where like if we could get Nate Chat or Matt on the phone, then like we can maybe convince him to like make this an esports team again. And what's sort of funny, and I'll tell you little tidbits there, is like I basically reached out to Matt the day he announced 100 Thieves, like initially, and like this is back in the day when it first happened, and I was like, hey, like,
Yeah, is this
congrats,
2016
like,
we're talking?
yeah, it's really early days,
Yeah.
and like I remember when like the brand like he announced it all, and I was like, this is amazing, this is gonna be like huge, like we like let us know if we can invest or talk, and him like literally just like not knowing who I was just like a random Twitter
Yeah.
follower, like like saying like, hey, let me invest, like
Yeah.
and,
$20.
exactly. And that basically continued for a while where while we were talking to other teams, and like we eventually came to this point where it's like we should really try and pursue like getting Nate Shot on the phone and to talk to us, because like that would be an amazing opportunity rather than us starting something from the ground up. Like we can work with Matt on this business that he already has and just sort of put like a team around him to make this into something bigger than like it already was. And so through a lot of cold direct messages, he basically followed me at some point in like 2015 or 2016. I don't really know why, and I don't think he knows why. I like to think it was a mistake. And
It was the mystical power of the universe drawing you two together.
He just followed me on Twitter, and he still didn't unfollow me after I DM'd him like probably 100 times, you know, like, which is crazy. And I eventually DM'd him one day and was like, hey, the Cavs are in the NBA Finals. Like, do you want to come to Game 1? You have to fly up to like the Bay Area. And he was like, sure, like he was like, let's do this, like okay. And I remember him just being like, what is going on? And I was like I'm a part of like Dan's team, like we can get you like tickets and whatever else. And basically like it worked out perfectly where we were able to get some time from Dan to carve out and talk with Matt and everything else, and basically went through like the initial vision of like what Matt had initially built, and then like turned into like of what it could be. And Dan like immediately was like, yes, like we need to do this. But the problem was we didn't really have a team. Like I was
point
still
of entry,
and also like I was still doing investing full time. Matt was still doing YouTube and streaming, and like he couldn't necessarily just leave that life. And so it was like, what do we do? And he was like, go and do this. And we're like, okay, like now what? And through a lot of like serendipity, like I knew that Jackson was like Jackson and I had been friends beforehand, and I was like, I know that you're sort of in like a transition period in your career. Like, can I convince you to like try and like work on this? And he was like, yeah, like absolutely, I want to do this. And so that was like sort of like the first person to like really, I would say, join Matt on building this all out. And that was like sort of where like I in the early days, like Jackson and I were working on the application, and Matt were working on the application to get into League of Legends and franchising, and we did all the interviews, and then like we got in, and it was like, okay, now you need to build a team. And I'm like, I'm interviewing all these coaches while like still doing my day job. And like, to be honest, like I know League of Legends as basically like a silver analyst, like you know.
Yes, he's one of us. I knew it.
And I'm literally like interviewing coaches, like asking them like questions, and and I'm like, okay, like let's do this. And thankfully I heard through the grapevine that that like probably was gonna be available, and I was like, how do I get in touch with him, because he's amazing. And like like I talked with him and like helped bring him in, and then we built a team, like, but this is all within a span of like a month basically. And and I again had no experience with like any of this, and neither did Matt, and like neither did Jackson. So like we were basically like, I think people talk about it, but like and Joseph or Jungle Juice like was basically helping me. He was like the only person I knew that was helping me on like the League of Legends side of game experience on navigating like what coaches are legitimate or not legitimate, and what game questions I should be asking these people, because I watched as like a casual fan and didn't like know a lot of the inner working questions. So yeah, that's like the initial story. And then in the past year or so, like after they've built out a team and everything else, I've transitioned back into like my investing day job, and I'm still pretty involved. I would say not nearly as involved as I once was. Jackson did most of like the off season this year for or Jackson and like Eric and John and those guys and Matt all did most of that stuff, and I was basically like not as involved on that side this year.
You're the intelligent designer, right? You made your creation and you just watch it run.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing for me, and I talk about this with Matt and Jackson and John all the time, but like it's so crazy to see where it's gone from even just a year ago. Of like I found a text yesterday. I texted Jackson and Matt, but it was like a picture of when they met Afremove for like the first time after they or right before they signed him, and I was like, this is insane. That was literally only like a year and a month ago. That's crazy to me. And I think for everyone, it's like I think it's just been amazing to see sort of where it's evolved, and like the fact that you guys exist as like as like a podcast is like truly mind blowing to me. So it's been super fun.
Well, it's about to get more mind blowing. I don't typically do this, but we just got a sub from Nadeshot. So thank you very much, Nadeshot, for that, man.
Yeah,
glad to have you here.
Oh no, he's watching.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get all these texts of like, why'd you say that?
Yeah, you better navigate this thing carefully. We're gonna set up these traps all over the place for you.
So Blake, it's so fun to think about the fact that you grew up a COD kid, knew who Nadeshot was, watched his vlog and YouTube and all that stuff, and then you obviously knew who Bang was, and you'd seen him play as a fan at Worlds. So within like a year, or less than a year, obviously, was there ever a moment where you just kind of step back and you're like, what is happening to me? Like, is this the Twilight Zone?
I think the first time that really happened was probably like in Miami when we like made it to the finals, and like I remember just being like, how did this happen? Like, right. like literally just like, what is happening? Is like it made no sense to me of like, how do we go from like basically scrambling to find coaches that we wanted to work with and were aligned with, and then to like putting together a roster that we were confident in, and then being like, okay, like it's actually working. Like I think that was just like a really big like holy shit moment for me, and I think the entire team of being like, how did this happen? Especially when like not even 6 months before that, we were literally like sitting and writing an application about how we were gonna get to the finals and do that. And like, so the fact that it actually happened is like, I can't even explain it. It's like
God mode.
That was like a really amazing moment. I think for me, like, I think it's really crazy just because like Nadeshot as a person is pretty much like what he is on camera is exactly the same as he is in person. And so like I felt like I knew him before I ever really met him, you know, and like the truth was I think I actually did know him, which is even weirder because like I when I talk with him, like it's still exactly the same as like what I would have imagined it might have been, you know, like like he's very down to earth, and he's not really fake on camera, and I think that's something that is really unique with him. Is like and to be like totally transparent, there was points where it was like, if we don't do this with Nadeshot, like what happens, you know, like how do we move forward if we can't get something done? And like I was basically like, there is no other path, like, you know, it's like I don't know if there is another person that we would want to be as like the face of the brand or the organization other than him, you know. And there were obviously questions, not really from our side, but I think from maybe people at Riot or wherever, or just even when the news initially broke, of like, why is there a Call of Duty guy like entering into League of Legends or other games? And I think for me, it was like that initial question is obviously there because it's just like, what relevancy does he have? But I think it's like does his fandom or like his fans carry over into League of Legends? But I think for me, it was like, he's just going to create fans. Like he's such a natural like person of like that people like, and because he's so genuine, like people naturally gravitated towards him, and like that was never really a concern for me or anyone on our team. So like I think it was like, that's just gonna happen. Like he's just gonna have fans, and people will like him because he's just very genuine.
Now we know why Nadeshot tuned in. He wanted to hear all these beautiful things being said about him. He's shedding tears of appreciation as he tells you to stop saying like so much. He says you got to get better at this podcasting thing.
No.
Man, he's got to knock you down a peg too. Wow.
He always has to.
Wow. What a guy.
You got to challenge those around you. Build everyone up. Well, I was going to say, I mean, here, this will build you back up, Blake.
I appreciate it.
Your prediction that he would create his own fan base played out This is one example of that, right? So we've talked a little bit about how we got into this whole thing, and Cole talks about how he watched the heist and he watched some of the vlogs for Nate Shot, and he's just like, this guy is, he's there's a magnetism, right?
Yeah, it's a story. He's like a natural storyteller, and there's obvious charisma there, and so seeing him telling that story was incredibly compelling. It's the whole reason I'm here.
So you can go back to the office and say I was right. I got that one.
After he knocks me down, I'll bring him back.
Well, we've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to get, when you create an organization, when you start something like this, when you write the application and you're probably making a lot of promises you don't really know if you can fully deliver on, but you've got to talk big. I know that we talked about getting as far as we did in 2018 and accomplishing some of the things that the organization did. Curious for your take on what your expectations were when you first got involved. Like, I mean, if you truly thought that we'd make it to the Spring Split Finals and make it to Worlds and pick up 2 wins at Worlds, like all that stuff, let me know. But kind of just like level set with us on, when you go into this, what are people expecting, and kind of what, and obviously how did that compare to what you actually got?
Yeah, I don't know what my expectations really were when I was entering into this, just because I didn't know what basically like what the expectations were of the team. I think from a public perspective, let's say the expectations were they're a new team. If they make playoffs in their first year, that would be great. Whereas for me, I was like, we're putting together a great team and we're spending quite a bit. And I assumed that we would make playoffs and we would go far. Mm-hmm. I was confident in Prolly as a coach, and I was confident in basically the team that he was building. And I didn't have any fear that we wouldn't make playoffs or we wouldn't do well. But it definitely exceeded all of my expectations as an investor and as someone who was involved. We didn't expect, one, how many fans would actually be rallying around the team, but also I didn't expect how many people like would join us on this whole path, or how well our players would do. I had no clue of what, like, how big the meta shifts were, or how that would impact our teams. And I think probably if he ever comes on this, or if you ever talk with him, he'll always say like he's building a team that is sort of meta proof, where if the meta changes, because no one ever knows what is going to happen, he needs to basically have someone that can carry from any position or do extremely well, and when the resources are funneled into them. I never even thought about that. Like, I was just like, we have a great team, but him and the team were always thinking about how to build the right team for success. So for me, I was always like, we're going to do well, but I didn't expect us to do that well. And for me, it's been really fun to look back, and my expectations next year are even higher. Maybe just because I was spoiled in year one of an org, but I definitely expect like a lot of great things from the team, especially in League of Legends, but also in other games. I'm really hoping that 2019 is the year of like our first championship for the team, because I think that's that's the one thing that we're really missing. And I think Matt will talk about that as well, or has talked about that, where that's the one thing that we don't have yet. We have tons of fans, or I think tons of fans, and we have good success, and we have a great business team and great support staff. But I think to really solidify us as a big name in esports and gaming, we need to win a championship and multiple times, hopefully, in across a bunch of different titles.
That's a blessing and curse of the successful first year, right? It's like you guys did so well beyond any expectations, but now it's like, okay, but we got to improve all the time.
What's really interesting is I think the expectations towards the end of the year last year were super high, and I think we kept them super high as well. But I think if you replace the fact that we were like, or if you just consider the fact that was our first year and our first Worlds, or like we were still building the plane in the air, like people have talked about, and like we're trying to figure out so many small things, and we were just a super small team, and we had like very little knowledge of how to do a lot of this stuff. I think it's insane the expectations that were put onto the players and just in general of the organization. But it's been amazing to watch them consistently exceed even the highest expectations. So for me, it's been amazing to watch.
Yeah, and I would argue that anybody who going into the second year of an organization could say, the only thing we're missing is a championship. It's been a pretty good ride.
I mean, there's other things that we're missing, trust me,
right.
But I don't, that is definitely, I think something that as an organization, like, is one of the biggest things that we should be striving for on the esports side.
Right. And I, a lot of, and especially traditional sports and all that stuff, it's like, you give them 10 years, 15 years, they'll put together a roster and develop. And there's like, no, year 2, we're going for it.
Yeah, I think it's also, fans are really fickle in esports and league specifically, where if you're not a top team, then it's hard to keep like loyal supporters if you haven't won championships. Right. And so I think as a team, it's really important to like deliver for the fans, but also for the organization, so we have like true staying power of like, in 10 years people will remember that we won a championship, and rather than like we made the finals in 2000 or 2018.
Right.
Like that's not something that we want to be remembered for. At least I don't think so.
No, definitely not. Never settle. Kind of thinking about league a little bit, just in a more macro sense. Hugely successful 2018. Obviously, I know we've seen a lot of stuff about highest viewing numbers. Worlds was incredibly watched all around the globe. Yet I think we still hear this chat about league being a dead game, and I think it's at the point now where it's kind of a meme in that you hear people talk about it and joke about it and all this stuff, but it seems like the rumblings are always somewhere in a conversation, whether they're on the peripheral or what people are talking about. So really interested for your perspective on kind of the state of league, maybe as we go into 2019, and as you think about the next, let's say, 5 years of league, like how healthy do you see it? Where do you see it going? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I'm actually in the camp that league will be around in 20 years and still be a top title. I think from a gameplay perspective, it's great, and it's super fun to watch if you understand it. The understanding it is a whole other.
That's a hurdle. Yeah.
But if you understand it, it's extremely satisfying and fun to watch. But it's also playing it is ridiculously fun. And I think they've done an incredible job of making like regular patches and updates where you're keeping the people engaged, and the fact that it's still thriving. I think it's going to turn 10 this year, if I remember correctly, and that's pretty amazing. I think League of Legends, or like Counter-Strike, is the other big one that people always talk about, and Counter-Strike has been around for, I think, 20 something years at this point, and I don't see a world where like League just dies and goes away. I think that would mean, in my mind, MOBAs basically disappear, and so the only games that basically replace these other games are like new genres. Like you think about battle royales, taking some of the fans maybe away from first-person shooters, but they ultimately go back to the original games that they were hardcore fans of. And I think League is one of those games that has extreme staying power, specifically just from a farm perspective and things like that, where we have talent. We have an academy team that we have signed for several years, some of these players, some 3 years, that we're assuming they're going to be playing professionally at some point.
Yeah. And
you don't really have that in any other game. Maybe Counter-Strike, you have like a minor league team or something like that, but we're actually investing in sort of sustaining pro players in this game. And I think from an esports perspective, there's nothing more that you can really ask of a game title to have a farm system where people are playing at the college level or high school level, or they're on an academy team. That just means that these players see a future of going pro as a sustainable career. Whereas in Call of Duty, like, we don't have a farm system or anything like that. Like that's, we don't know. And obviously we hope that those games stay around, but I actually think the games that are at the top today won't look that far off 10, 15 years from now. And I think from a franchise perspective, like from an investor perspective, we really want League of Legends to stay relevant because of our franchise spot and what we're trying to do there. So I definitely hope that it's there, and I think they're the right team to do it. I think the game is amazing, and every time I get people to play with me, they're like, wow, this is really exciting. But from a viewership perspective, like the hurdle of watching it can be really daunting, and so that's a whole other challenge that they really have to tackle.
Yeah, and so within that, you kind of hit on like 4 or 5 different things that I'd love to get your perspective on. I think first, I want to hit the viewership piece and how, challenging, and Nate Schott has talked about some of the challenges he's experienced personally and just trying to get into the game, right? And I think, I'll say a couple of things. Cole and I have gotten probably 6 other people into it. It's an easy game if you have a bunch of friends to play and have fun.
Yep.
I think if you are more competitive minded, it's got a killer learning curve, right? You're playing against people who just know a lot more, so it can be really challenging that way. But how much of a barrier do you think it is, this difficulty of really getting into the game and feeling like you're proficient versus a Fortnite, which I feel like you can kind of pick up and jump into? No disrespect to Fortnite players. I can't build to save my life, so I'll just put that out there.
Me neither.
Yeah. But how big of a problem do you think it is so far as the survivability of a game long term, both from a viewership perspective and from an adding new players to the player base perspective?
Yeah, I think that's something I ask myself a ton. I actually think League is fairly easy to comprehend compared to, let's say, a game like even Call of Duty or Overwatch, where it's super fast paced and you're watching from a first person perspective or third person perspective, where the camera angles are just jumping around. Ultimately, the best way to understand the game is playing it, and that makes sense in traditional sports too, where if you had never played basketball or you consider rugby, like I've never played rugby, and I turn it on and I understand some of what's happening, but I'm never really going to appreciate like what's fully happening unless I play the game. And I think that naturally just gets solved when people play the game at least once. But like, because people have played basketball since they grew up, when they're like in preschool or whatever it might be, they immediately understand when they turn on basketball later on. And I think that just naturally will happen with League of Legends, hopefully, where people play it once or twice and they're like, this is really interesting to watch. I think there's minor things they can tweak to make it a little bit more like it's something that you can understand, but I think it's going to be really hard to get people to understand if they haven't played it. Just like if you've never played basketball or rugby or soccer, you're just not going to understand what's happening. And I think that just naturally happens when people start playing it more. And I hope that it's really just lowering the barriers to entry of playing your first game, because I think getting the level 30 for ranked is a real grind. Like, I don't think Nate Schott has gotten to level 30 yet. And it took me a very long time to get to level 30, because I actually think the level, like, to get to level 30 is more of a grind than like getting into ranked. Like, once you're in ranked, like, it doesn't feel as burdensome, whereas like I'm playing like blind games in League of Legends and basically like begging someone to play 80 carry or or whatever, like that's not a great experience. Yeah, exactly. You're just spamming mid and hoping that they don't pick your champion or they like actually listen to you. That's still a really bad experience. So I hope they fix that, but I think it's really just getting people to play it is the key. I don't think it's going to be a game that people understand otherwise, but I think Jackson told me like his parents have started to watch and they understand like slightly. Like I think if there's certain big macro things, like the fact that when someone dies, it's really important in the game. Like those things are easy to follow. It's really just like understanding abilities. Like there's certain champions that when they're picked, I don't fully understand what their ults are or like things like that. So I definitely understand that perspective, and that just takes time. So that's sort of the best part of the game, though, is that it keeps giving of like you start watching and you're like, who is this champion? What is their ultimate? This is amazing to watch. I think that's sort of the secret sauce of the game.
Yeah, I think like going back to what you said, like the barrier of entry, it's like it's for a shooter, it's like you shoot someone and they die and everyone can innately understand that or whatever. MOBA's like maybe a little harder, but it's like basically you're trying to like kill their stuff and kill them. So it's not that bad. It's like compare it to like football. I'm pretty sure last night, like my aunt's grandmas, whatever, was saying that wasn't a pass interference and they didn't call that. You know what I mean? Like, people just watch stuff. They understand it. They just need like a little bit of experience with it. And League is like, it moves quickly, and it's like lots of flashing things happening in one area. It's like, who shot what spell was that? What, you know?
Yeah.
So it can be a little hard to track.
You'll never fully appreciate how hard it is to be an NFL player or NBA player or League of Legends player until you start playing. And I think that's the key to making it a bigger game, is just getting more people to play, because you'll never understand how hard it is to perform at the top level unless you play. And even if it's your grandma watching the game, she has some appreciation for it because maybe she threw a football once and she's like, wow, it's insane to throw a football. You know,
Right.
there's that component. So I think that's still the major key, and it's just getting people to play. I think League has done a pretty good job of getting at least the system specs low enough where anyone can play on like a Mac or PC or like a very low quality computer. That's been one part of it, but actual gameplay and like user experience needs to be improved to lower the confusion barriers to entry.
Yeah. Another thing you talked about was, well, and this is something I'm interested for your unique perspective on, but things that could be changed in the game to make it more accessible or watchable or enjoyable. Now that franchising is part of League of Legends, interested for your perspective on how much, you know, when we think about what needs to be fixed in a game, it's typically, well, it's the developer or the publisher, right? It's going to be one of the two of those people. They're going to take care of it. I feel like there's a third party in League now with a vested interest here, which is the owners. And we saw a tweet from Mark Cuban, it's probably a month ago now, which feels like a year in Twitter time, but
several years.
Yeah, maybe it was 2014. No, but he was talking about some of his reservations specifically about buying into League, and you know, I think it sounded like he had considered potentially picking up a franchise when that was going on. Yeah. But he talked about the meta and how difficult it is for pros to kind of keep up, all that kind of stuff. Interested for your take on the role that franchise owners, so you know, and you by extension, play in this conversation. Is there room for the franchise owners to influence Riot and to try to help them to make this product even better? And is that something that, if it's not there, it needs to be there?
Yeah, I think from a franchise owner perspective, we definitely have more open conversations with Riot about what we would like to see. I think Matt or Nadeshot talked a little bit in his interview with Travis about from the business perspective. For me, I'll talk about more from a gameplay perspective. I actually think most of Mark Cuban's concerns with regards to burnout are somewhat valid. I think players are playing a lot, but most of it is out of like their own interest of wanting to play more and practice more. I think most of my issues with, let's say, League of Legends or most professional games, or like games that are played at the highest level, is that the practice tools for professional players actually suck. The fact that these players and pro teams have to scrimmage against other professional teams for practice is absolutely insane. That they're practicing against these other teams. And if you think about, for League of Legends, when our team is practicing against another team in like LCS, we're literally practicing CSing for like 30 minutes of the game. You know, like that's insane to me. We're just taking free throws for like 80% of our practice, and then it all gets messed up with like someone cheesing at level 2 or whatever. You know, like that stuff is really frustrating. And like when all they really should be practicing is like vision around the Baron pit, and then like, or like how they're gonna set up for a team fight. Like you can't practice that right now without actually going into like a pure scrimmage and CSing for 90 minutes. I think when the developers start to build tools for specific scenarios or things like that, it will greatly reduce burnout, in my opinion. Because,
I know you don't have insider information on this, but do you is that something you see happening? Like, is that a necessary thing that Riot will just have to do over time?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a bunch of other questions about that, because they're in the business of making a game ultimately at the end of the day for the 100 other million players, you know. And so to make a tool or invest their resources into building something for the 1,000-something pro players is something that's probably really hard to convince at the highest level. And so I think it's sort of an uphill battle. But I hope that they do, and I hope that other games do as well. I think there's a lot of aspiring pros who want better tools or want to understand how to get better at games. And if it's not the publishers themselves, maybe it's someone's building their own tools on the outside. Like, I know there's third-party apps that allow you to like do smite challenges and things like that, but it's not perfect, and it's obviously not still the game. But there is, for first-person shooters, there's like aim trainers and things like that exist, but we don't have that really for League, other than maybe like the smite trainer.
Yeah.
Well, what about things like one of the things Mark Cuban talked about was meta changes, right? And the constantly changing meta presents a problem too, where, you know, it would be easier to manage your workload as a player if you didn't have to keep track of like, all right, who got buffed, who got nerfed, what's going on. You know, essentially every other week they have to reprogram themselves.
Yeah, I sort of love the meta changes. Like, I think that's sort of the most fun part of League, is trying to keep up and see new things like get entered into the game. I think definitely introducing harsh changes or like really big changes is something that I have a problem with, and can agree with Mark with, where you look at last year when Reckless benched himself because he just was like, I'm not going to learn how to play mages and bot. Like, I'm just going to keep playing like that. That's a really crazy thing. And I hope that they consider what impact these have at a competitive level. But again, we see it in Fortnite, for example, where they introduce like game-breaking items for tournaments all the time. But the truth is, like, they're building the game for the other hundreds of millions of players, you know, and until a publisher like fully, and I think Riot does a great job of this overall, because they do consider the pro players and the competitive scene, but it's still not like fully enough, because they do need to make changes. They need to make it engaging for the person who's playing solo queue, rather than just like, is it entertaining to watch? And that's a really difficult challenge. I don't envy their jobs, because I think that's actually one of the most difficult things to do is balancing, especially while factoring in like your average solo queue player, and then factoring in LCS. Because like I know, for example, like anytime they buff like Galio, for example, at all, like Galio is like super OP in pro play. But like in solo queue, like he's not that great. And
control
like, yeah, exactly. And so it's like the moment they do anything to that champion, even though he might have a low win rate in solo queue, like the moment they buff him at all, he skyrockets in solo queue, because they like buffed him too much. Like they didn't realize like how overpowered he is, or like he just becomes like super overpowered in pro matches. I think that's just a very difficult challenge.
There's a really interesting. It's almost like a symbiosis with the pro players you get, and because you think about how many kids grew up watching Michael Jordan play basketball, or LeBron James, and they went out and picked up a basketball and just started shooting around and messing around.
Yep.
So I think we've got to get to a point, and I think Aframu is one of those players, right, where people have been able to watch him for years. You know, he's one of the longer tenured players who is still, he won an MVP last year. Yep. So he's still at the top of his game. Yep. So I think the trick is extend the lifespan of these pros so that they can develop the fan base that will then develop the next generation of players, right?
Yeah, I also think it's sort of a myth where like some like Mark Cuban or some of these other people say that pro players' careers are super short. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's just that the game's lifespan maybe is short. But you look at Counter-Strike and like Virtus Pro, a lot of those players were close to 30 and still performing at a top level. I think it's just they grow up with the game, and when the game maybe starts to fizzle out, they're no longer going to play it, or like they're no longer going to be seen as pro players, let's say, or they're going to retire because they're like, this is at the end of that game. But I think in games like League of Legends or Counter-Strike, we do see a slightly higher like age for like your career. I think Aframu still has hopefully several more years, if not like a dozen more years of playing. We have no real sign of what it means, especially because the skills of a pro League of Legends player is far more than just a pure mechanical ability. And I think that's something that we're going to have to see how that evolves.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's not
Leadership.
like other sports aren't stratified either with, the distribution of players and how long their careers are. I mean, take the NFL, like, if like the average starting running back career is like 3.5 years or something like that. And I think on average, the average, player career is even shorter than that. So it's not like that doesn't happen in traditional sports either. You just have some stars that are going to last longer. You're going to have your SOASs here and there that'll just like have these really long careers, and they'll play at a high low for a long time and be watched more. And some people that will kind of flame out, just like anything else. So I don't think that's a concern that's specific to League, even though it kind of feels that way since a lot of them are so young.
I mean, you look at like Call of Duty, for example, a lot of the pro players that when Nadeshot first started playing are still playing today. Like they're like Nadeshot, if he didn't pursue his other career of whatever, like we could still theoretically be playing. And I think that's just the key, is that the game stays relevant and people continue to want to practice and perform, because if the game and the publisher isn't investing towards it, then they're just going to fizzle out naturally. And that's, I think, where the myth comes in.
Yeah, right. And when you're launching a full new title every year, that makes it even more challenging to stay relevant. Consistent.
Yeah, talk about meta changes. Like you're going from like
World War II.
Yeah, you're going from flying to walking on the ground like that.
Right.
That couldn't be much more of a meta change than that.
A little different, yeah. Minor patch notes on that one.
Exactly.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Interested for your perspective on kind of the ownership and management of and I have 100 Thieves in mind, obviously, but I think this question could be asked about any startup, anything that your multiple owners coming on board and investors. So from your seat, what would you say is how do you maintain the vision of an organization as you get a more diverse set of owners and investors coming on board? And obviously Drake, Scooter, Dan Gilbert, Sequoia, all these come to mind, and they all specialize in different areas. But how do you make sure that the vision of an organization stays strong as it goes?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think almost every team or every startup will go through some phase of trying to figure out what that is, or maybe get distracted along the road. I think for 100 Thieves specifically, I don't think you can put together a more stacked executive team. I think the world of John and Jackson, Jason, and Matt, like they all have their own unique abilities that they add to the team, and I think they are not ones to get distracted. From the beginning, Matt has had a vision of what this was going to be. Like a year ago, Matt would have told me like straight up, this is where we're going to be. Like, I would have called him crazy. But he knew from the beginning, like he was going to build an amazing apparel business, and then he was going to build like an amazing like team for League of Legends and Call of Duty and everything else. And he knew that he was just going to crush. And I think that's super admirable. And he hasn't gotten distracted. I think the investors, if anything, are there not to hopefully distract, and much more of like, hey, how can we help? And I think with Scooter and Drake and Sequoia and other investors that are at the table, they're all there and having conversations about where we're going to be in a couple of years and how do we get there and who do we need to talk to or who do we need to hire is really key. I think from a business perspective, though, everyone is very aligned and has a good understanding of where this company needs to be in a couple of years and what we need to do. I think there are, like, and on macro level, a lot of teams are getting distracted. I think it's really easy to sort of lose sight of what you were trying to build when there is as much capital looking to come into the space or whatever it might be. Or like just the sheer attention on the space can be like hypnotizing to some founders or executives.
Are you alluding to the $150 million shopping?
I'm not alluding to anyone elsewhere, but I do think like we are in for an interesting couple of years in esports as a space, just because there has been so much money flowing in or so much attention on the space. It's going to naturally be under more scrutiny when people expect higher revenue or returns or whatever it might be in the next couple of years. So that will be super interesting to watch from like from my perspective, but I also think from 100 Thieves perspective, where they are very, very focused, and everything that they've done to date has been very deliberate and intentional. And I think any mistakes that happen along the way or have been learned and like will not be repeated.
Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense. It connects back to what you talked about earlier, which is having somebody with a vision as the CEO is actually, it sounds like, one of the most important pieces, so that they don't get distracted as all these other voices enter the conversation. And you said earlier that without Nade Shot, you don't know if this team happens, right?
Yeah.
So I think
exactly. And I think Matt, from a brand and like content perspective, like he has a very strong opinion on a lot of this, and it's just a matter of enabling that to continue. Like the biggest fear is basically that gets lost when there's more people in the room, and like he is maybe intimidated, or Jackson or John are intimidated of like, hey, I don't want to say this, or maybe I shouldn't pursue this. I think it's just continuing to enable them to do what they're doing, because they've done such a great job so far.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I ask an off-script question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So and just hearing you guys talk about like the vision of what you wanted to achieve when this whole thing started, and now you're here. I would be interested to hear in how you view, from an investment perspective, like what your take is on what 100 Thieves has done with apparel. Obviously, like there's no other esports team that has made apparel that much a part of its brand and its business. And I mean, it seems to have been wildly successful from our perspective. And of course, there's you hear some complaints about like, oh yeah, like I couldn't get my hands on stuff from the drop or whatever. But, by and large, like this has been hugely influential. And even outside of, the spheres that the teams are playing in, you see streamers all over the place, not associated with 100 Thieves, wearing the apparel on stream. And you see like Josh Hart doing it. It's like that's a huge thing, and it's something very unique to 100 Thieves. So how have you thought of that from an investment and business perspective?
Yeah, and this goes back to like Matt or Nate Chat from the beginning was like, I want to build an apparel brand that people actually want to wear. And Matt will talk about how he could have thrown just Nade Shot on a shirt when he was a big YouTuber or whatever, in being like, I could just sell that merch. And you see so many people do this. And I think Matt was very deliberate in wanting to build something bigger. I think from an apparel perspective, it's been insane to just see how many people are wearing and wanting this apparel. Like for me, like I'm like super pumped when it goes live. I'm like, like I'm like, I want to buy this. Like I need to get this. And I think that's just a really cool thing that they've done. I think it's a really careful balance of, like you said, there are going to be people that like, hey, I just want a sweatshirt or I just want a t-shirt. And I think they've talked about how they want to do more and make sure that those people can get it. But I think there is something really unique, at least from my perspective, of being like, I am one out of X number of people that maybe have this hoodie. And that's really, really cool. And I think they've been really deliberate of how they've built it. And I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. I think the way you build a really big brand in gaming or in any space is like through some type of exclusivity or like a halo effect of like, that's a really cool brand. And I think that goes to like to show like what they're trying to build, and they've been successful in it so far, and it will be interesting to see how that continues to evolve or how they creatively make it still feel like there is a halo effect, as they also want to make sure that the people who want the apparel can get it. So I think that's going to be the most difficult challenge, but I mean, it's been amazing to watch how many people want this merch or wants this apparel, and just seeing the streamers wear it and things like that. I think that was Matt's always his goal was like, I want this, like, even if they're not signed to 100 Thieves, they just want to wear it. And that's been awesome. Like, it's been like the fact that exists, like that's something he told me a year ago. It was like, like we're going to do this. And I was like, how are you going to get someone who's like signed to another team or like not signed to us to wear this? And like, sure enough, he knew what he's talking about.
Yeah, I think you could even maybe argue that the influence of the apparel is maybe greater than the influence of the teams right now, even with this success.
People wearing or buying the apparel might not even know players on our Call of Duty team or our League of Legends team, and I think that's a really interesting thing to consider. In how do you leverage sort of all three of those? How do you make sure that the person who's watching our League of Legends team is also wanting our apparel, and then also the person who's just buying our apparel because they like the design is watching League of Legends? I think that's those are all fun challenges.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I think Tyler with ESPN was at that CS:GO event this past weekend and tweeted that 100 Thieves was one of the top 3 jerseys that he saw there, and they don't, you guys obviously don't have a CS:GO team or anything like that. It's pretty insane to see that reach and that influence in a game where they're not even participating. So
yeah, and I think from a fan perspective, it's sort of all across the board. There might just be people that are straight up fans of Nadechat, so they bought that, or there might be fans of Valkyrie, they bought it, it's so crazy to try and figure out when you talk to someone who's wearing the apparel and be like, how did you buy this? And every single person has a different answer. So it's been really fun for me to watch it all grow as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, hey, I know we're coming up on an hour. Cole, was there anything else you wanted to jump in with from a question perspective, or should we do kind of a wrap up?
I think
I have one question left that I'd like to ask.
Okay, why don't you ask that question, and then Blake, if you're okay with it, we did have a couple more questions come through in chat that
absolutely
I think would be interesting to address.
Yeah.
So, if you don't follow Blake on Twitter, definitely do that. We'll make sure his socials and all that stuff are in there, and it's at Blake IR, right?
Yep, that's right.
And the thing that I really like about your Twitter feed is that you bring kind of this unique vantage point on esports and just the future of what we can expect in this space, because it's so fun to think about, and I think for anybody who is a fan, it's fun to imagine what's going to be happening 5 years from now. It seems like such a long time, but it'll be here before we know it. So I would love to get your take on what it would take, or I guess, what would it take for an esport to reach the level of prominence and cultural awareness and relevancy as a traditional sport we have today. It is kind of one of those things where the Pats game last night was a cultural moment, right? I went to stuff today, and that was the way people opened their presentations. It's just talking about that game.
Yeah.
So, at what point can I expect to go and hear people talking about the play that Bang made last night, and how can we get there faster, please?
Yeah, I wish I knew the real answer to what that will be. I think it's inevitable. Hopefully, that is a thing. I think I'm a huge believer in esports, obviously, but I also think it will be bigger than traditional sports in 20-30 years. I truly think that people will care more about competitive video games than watching NFL or something like that. And I think it's actually going to have to be slower, just because it starts with people just playing these games and growing up playing the games is key. You think about how many people grew up playing Halo and whatever, and they just phased out. They just never continued to play past that point, or they played Super Smash Bros. Because they just didn't know that was a thing. That people just continued to play, or there was a competitive scene they could follow. And so when that naturally, now when you play the league in high school and maybe you went to college and you stopped playing, you're still maybe going to watch the game occasionally on Saturday and Sunday, and that will be the key to continue to spiral it. I think there's, from a macro perspective, I think you need publishers and owners to work way closer. I think that's the biggest thing that needs to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a publisher one day that builds their game with owners directly, and owners have actual ownership in the game itself, and they're all working together to be hey, we're going to just build a true esports game. I think that would be a really interesting strategy for a publisher one day. But again, the problem is that these games really do need to appeal to the mass audience, and then the esports side of it is still such a small part. And historically, esports has been viewed as much more of a marketing expense for these guys. And just recently, in the past 5-10 years, it's turned into something that is much bigger, and people have turned that more organically. So there's a lot of questions and nuances to a lot of that stuff. Can you force a game to be an esport? I would say with Overwatch, probably not. But that might be a game specific thing. Like there might be a world where if all of the teams came together, built a game with him, and it was a really great game, like the game has to be amazing. And I don't know if that, like, how you just make an amazing game. Like if it was that easy, then like that would exist.
It's a unicorn, right?
Yeah. But I do think that will be a super important component of it, because as of today, I think publishers do hold a little bit too much power in the ecosystem. Like the fact that they own the sport of League of Legends is really crazy.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, if Spalding owned the NBA and could just wake up tomorrow and be like, we're going to play with 3 basketballs, like that's a crazy concept, because that can literally happen where it's like they introduce a new champion and you're like, I need to play with that champion now.
Right.
Like we all need to buy this. And that's a strange dynamic that will hopefully get resolved over time.
I'm excited for basketball skins. I think that's going to be really...
yeah. There you go.
It'll be great. Yeah.
Get like your LeBron James Darius.
Yeah. Oh, that. I was talking about skins you put on your basketball.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. That
would
will naturally
LeBron
happen.
James Darius would be amazing.
Yeah.
Sure, the basketball, and it would bounce back.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so just a few questions from chat, if you don't mind, Blake.
Yeah.
I have a question here. I'm going to rephrase this a little bit. So given the influx of your new investment money that you've raised in your Series A and everything, and given how year 1 went, I mean, is the vision internally sort of to double down on what you currently are in, or is it, are you looking for expansion to other titles or other possible revenue streams? Where your mind's at in terms of direction?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to specifics just because, again, I don't fully know. I'm not intimately involved every day with those conversations. I think from a high level, it's definitely trying to continue to do what we're doing, but with like 110%, let's say, and trying to continue to crush and execute. I think what we're invested in right now is takes up a lot of time and a lot of resources, and specifically with League of Legends, like there's so much invested into that game, and naturally it's going to be one of our bigger attention. It's something that just soaks up most of our resources from a esports perspective. But I think from a team, like we're all fans of other games as well, and like we obviously see people say like, hey, we should enter into that, and I at least for me, I read Reddit all the time. Like I see those posts, and I read the Discord. Like I see all those things exist. So for me, I would say just keep asking. I'm a huge fan of a lot of different games. I watch tons of different games, but that's something that obviously we just need to evaluate. I think Matt and Jackson and John and Jason, all those guys will basically say like the games that we enter into are like we just don't want to half-ass it. Like that's the biggest fear is like if we're going into a game, like we're not just going to pick up like a really crappy roster just for the sake of saying that we're in that game, and we always want to give it like 200%. So a lot of this is like very like I don't know, we're just opportunistic of like, is this a really good opportunity? Yeah, it's like, is this a really good time for us to enter, or yes or no? And then like, what does it actually like? Does it make sense from a business perspective? Is the other question. And I think that's actually really hard to maybe evaluate, because from a sponsor level, like you don't get paid on like a per game basis. So those things are really interesting from a like internal conversation of like, how do you actually measure an ROI for a game that you enter into?
Yeah. I guess this is sort of related to that question. Someone else asked about the content house. So what your take is on the content house, what the goal will be, how you're looking at that to generate like a return for what you're putting into it.
I mean, again, I can't speak like to specifics just because Matt would obviously know way more on that. Mm-hmm. I think for me, as like I'm also a fan, and I want Matt and Valkyrie and those guys to all make more content. Like I think that's like the dream. Is I think anytime that Matt can have the camera on is like I want it on. Like I think he like and he would disagree, but I actually find every component of his day interesting, just because his life is very different than maybe your eyes or whatever. And so I think
hey, so you claim.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. Maybe you're going to In-N-Out every day. Who knows? But I think it's definitely for me. And I think the org's goal is to create more content and put Matt with more people that are comfortable maybe being on camera or want to create content with him is super key. When he was back in the Optic House and things like that, it was it was much easier to create content because he wasn't just sitting. And like nowadays he's sitting in an office, and people are working and on calls, and that's not necessarily super fun for him to create content with. But he does a good job of it occasionally, where you see him maybe vlog at the office, but it's very different than when he's like doing like cheeseburger tests or whatever with his with like the old people in Optic. I think that's stuff that will naturally hopefully come, and I think it's also just a really great opportunity to give like an inside look at other creators and give exposure to them and maybe like also share their personality. Like I know when Nate Shot, the first person who ever was like signed with 100 Thieves was like Nick Merckx, and I remember Nate Shot just being like, he's gonna be massive. Like he's got such a great personality, and the more we show like his like he always like was like, I just need to like help give exposure to him, and that's not to discredit Nick, because Nick has done an amazing job on his own. But like if you look at like the Nate Shot and Nick videos when Nick used to visit in LA or whatever, like those videos did incredibly well, and because they're just really great together. And the more that you have those dynamics and capture it on camera, it's great for everyone. So I think at the end of the day, the real goal is just to put Matt back in a space where he can create more content and be with people that are like-minded and also creating content. Whereas like Jackson or John or those guys are just like, we need to be on calls, we need to be doing this other stuff. And Matt obviously is on calls too, but he wants to like also just create content, because that's like right. he can't completely neglect what he's made for the past decade.
Jackson only has limited availability for his sup fans.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, I understand. Final question from chat is to get your take on the roster moves that happen in the offseason for LCS, and I understand the framing of this more as we saw some pretty high profile stuff going on, on other teams too, not just 100 Thieves. What is this indicative of from like an ops standpoint in the league, and what does this say about franchising and the state of LCS?
Yeah, I mean, I think even if you look at last year, like the parity amongst the teams, like it was actually pretty competitive within the entire league, and I think that's been a great thing for the league. Like every time I watched the game, it was never like, this is a no-brainer, we're going to win this game. That just didn't exist. And I think with franchising, there was always this concern of, is it going to kill the competitiveness or whatever it might be? And I think that's actually sort of been the opposite in LCS specifically. LEC, we'll see what happens. I think it's been the same, where a lot of these teams have really stepped up. But I think it goes back to like, ultimately fans are going to support the team that wins and does well, or at least is like putting in the effort. If you're not doing well, then it's a lot harder to have fans continue to ride with you through the good and bad. And I think every team basically understands that and wants to do well. And from the most part, we've seen, at least in LCS, like every single team made some big moves to invest towards the future and make sure that they get fans. And I think from like an investor perspective, or just from a fan perspective, like when you choose who you're a fan of, like 100 Thieves is competing for every fan in North America, let's say. Like there is that's a really weird thing. Whereas in the Cavs perspective, the Cavs at least have Cleveland fans at the end of the day. Yeah. Where and like we 100 Thieves, we don't necessarily have a base set of fans. We have Nate Shot fans, let's say, but we need to try and fight for the whole share of NA fans, which is really exciting but also really difficult. And so I think the teams all started to understand that dynamic and be like, we need to invest, we need to get a really great team, we need to do well, because at the end of the day, that is probably the most important driver for fans.
Yeah,
but again, it's not super sustainable. So like from a 100 Thieves perspective, like it's been building fans through content and apparel and other verticals, but we're still going to invest very heavily towards trying to win those championships.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, you have Bang and Someday to like bring the Korean hordes of fans into NA, right?
And Hui.
Funnel them in.
Yeah,
and Hui too.
Yeah, and let me tell you, like it's been like let's say like last year when we were signing these players, or when I was like negotiating with these players, like it was one of the most like amazing things ever to, like when they're like, yes, we're signing the dotted line. And I can't tell you like how much work goes into the off season of trying to make sure that like we build a great roster. Like I don't think any team just went into the off season and was like, we're not going to build a great roster. Like there was tons of conversations and thoughtfulness that like went in for every single team, and I think every team was very deliberate about the roster moves that they made this year. It's just a question of like, were they right, and were those the right moves? Because I think for us, we had a good understanding of what we needed to do this year, and we're hoping that pays off. And I'm like extremely excited to watch this weekend. Like I'm just itching to get up, like literally just watch.
Yeah. I think like the anticipation has been killing me too. And when I watch like, you know, the duo streams that Bang will be doing or something, like I'm itching to see the matchup with Double Lift and everything. Oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to it so much. I can't believe, you know, it's almost upon us. The season starts this weekend. Jordan and I will be going out for week 3, so we'll actually be traveling out, and
I'll be there week 2. So
we'll just miss. We're passing ships in the night. How sad. Yep. But yeah, it's just going to be, you know, we're looking forward to a great year, and it's I'll say that it's kind of interesting to hear you said this, and Joseph said this when he was on the show last week, you know, that the aspirations are for a championship. Like it's kind of like we're not satisfied with anything less, and like that's really cool to hear as a fan. And we know that you're taking on a lot of pressure on yourself by saying that, but man, it's this looks like the team that can do it. So
yeah, I mean last year when we were debating who to sign and who we were talking to, I had literally probably said to Nadeshot and I was like, if we get Aframu, we are going to win, or we're going to get to Worlds. And I was like, well, all right, like
yeah,
like okay. And like I mean, we always, I think Nadeshot and I were always sort of like, okay, like that, we'll take that with a grain of salt. Like, yeah, right, like that'd be like insane. I literally remember Jackson and Matt and I being like, that would be literally incredible. Like if we made it to Worlds in year 1, like no way. Like, can you imagine? Like, and sure enough, that happened. But I think this year the expectations are super high. But I think everyone understands it. I think the players understand it, and they're all putting in the work, and the coaching staff is putting in the work. I think it's just a matter of like seeing how we do. You know, I think they're all putting in the time, and it's just a matter of seeing if it pays off. I'm really excited to see how it all plays out, and it's definitely gonna be a fun year, because I think if you told me last year what was going to happen and all the events that took place, like none of us would have been able to predict anything that would have happened there. And I think we have no idea what's going to happen over these next 2 splits, but it's just a matter of adapting quick and making sure that we don't get distracted and just continue to try and win.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly like not minced words about, you know, what's going to happen. And neither has like the hype video where, you know, they're like crossing out their like former team affiliations and everything with this.
I saw a Reddit post earlier that was saying that was like bad manners. I don't think that was bad manners, but whatever. I can't. I can't believe how.
Yeah, it's just hype, man. It's just hype. It's just hype, and it's working.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think we want, at least from my perspective, like I always said, the thing that League of Legends needs more of is like there needs to be more rivalry. There needs to be more like there needs to be more double lifts of like saying this person is trash or whatever it might be. Like we don't really have that. Like and that's just the nature of like these players are all fans with each other and are all friends with each other, and they're all respect each other so much that like they're not going to do that, but they like. That needs to happen. I think if you look at the NBA and NFL, like these guys like actually hate each other. You know, like they will say in a post game interview like that person played bad, or like that's why I won. Like we don't see that in the league, and I think we need more of that, and we need more of those storylines to exist, because I think for 100 Thieves is really interesting, like all the different storylines that have naturally just developed between different teams, like Team Liquid or CLG or whatever it might be. Like that's been really exciting to watch, and I think that's what the league needs more of to like increase viewership and just like keep the fans engaged.
Players, you heard Blake say it. Dial up the spice. We need more spice.
Oh yeah, I'll tell all of them to just like go in their post game interview and talk shit. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right.
It would not give us less to talk about on this pod. So
yeah. Exactly.
All right, man. Well, we will wrap up here. I know there's so much other stuff that we were maybe going to discuss tonight. So maybe we'll have to figure out another time where we can do this and flesh out the rest of the conversation. But we're very grateful for your time tonight to talk to us and share a little bit of the story of what happened and what you guys are doing now and the vision and your obvious unique perspective about VC and esports investing and everything. So it would be remiss if I didn't mention that Blake goes on amazing like Twitter streaks where he will just post these crazy threads like, all right, here's what's going on with this esports related topic. So we highly encourage you to follow him on Twitter if you don't already, and he's at BlakeIR. Again, thank you so much. I know we had a lot of new viewers watching this week. So thank you. We hope you subscribe and stick around. And as we get ready to gear up our quote normal coverage of LCS as the split starts, we're very excited to be talking every week with you guys about how the team's doing and continuing to ride this crazy roller coaster that is being fans of 100 Thieves. So thank you guys for doing this. I think it's amazing to see this. You guys just grassroots create this podcast, and I remember when it first came out, just watching and be like, I literally can't believe this exists. So like this is amazing, and I love that you guys do this. So definitely keep doing it. And like the pleasure's all mine. I love having these conversations. So that's very kind of you, man. I hope there's no one watching this like way better at this than we are. That just is inspired and starts it and ends our brief streaming career. But all right,
we'll just keep going.
All right. Well, again, thanks everybody for listening. We'll wrap it up here, and we will see you after week 1. Holy cow, it's coming! Woo! It's coming. It's happening. Yeah.
Let's get it.
All right. Take care, everyone.